Arben Krasniqi stepped off the ship with nothing but a forged passport and a plan so ruthless it would one day shake the foundations of America's criminal underworld. He wasn't chasing the American dream. He was coming to own its nightmares. From the Bronx's shadowy alleys to Miami's neon clubs, Arben and his silent army carved their empire in blood and fear, leaving no witnesses, no traces, and no mercy. What began as survival soon turned into domination, and by the time the FBI noticed, the Balkan Shadow already ruled the streets. Please subscribe for daily new update of gang crime story and watch till end. In the late 1990s, as America's ports opened their doors to new waves of immigrants from war-torn Europe, a group of men quietly stepped off a cargo ship in New York. Among them was a young man named Arben Krasniqi. He was tall, with cold gray eyes and a quiet confidence that made others follow him without question. Arben wasn't like the other immigrants who came seeking jobs and a better life. He carried a darker ambition, the hunger for power and control. Behind his calm face lived years of struggle, forged in the chaos of Albania's violent post-war streets, where survival meant breaking the rules before the rules broke you. Arben and his crew, 4 men from the same village, rented a small basement apartment in the Bronx. They worked menial jobs at first, washing cars and loading boxes at warehouses. To outsiders, they looked like ordinary workers trying to make ends meet. But behind that disguise, they built something far more dangerous. Every night, after long hours of labor, they gathered around a kitchen table lit by a single bulb, planning how to climb the criminal ladder in a city already filled with giants, the Italians, Russians, and Colombians. Arben's plan was simple: move quietly, strike fast, and never make noise. Their first step into crime was small, but effective smuggling untaxed cigarettes. From New Jersey into New York, it was low risk but profitable, and within months, they were making more money than they ever had back home. Arben used those profits to buy stolen cars, which his crew shipped back to Albania and resold for double the price. The operation expanded rapidly, and soon the group became known in underground circles as the Balkan Shadow. They kept no records, no photos, and no names. Everyone who worked for them used nicknames, and anyone who asked too many questions vanished from the streets. By the time Arben turned 30, his network had grown beyond petty smuggling. They started dealing with forged documents, passports, driver's licenses, visas, anything that could give an illegal immigrant a new identity. They found clients not only among Albanians, but among Serbians, Russians, and even some Americans looking to escape their criminal pasts. Arben handled every deal personally and demanded total loyalty. Those who failed him were never seen again. Despite their growing empire, Arben made sure his crew remained invisible. He taught them how to blend in, how to act harmless, how to smile in front of police officers. When others flaunted their wealth with cars and jewelry, Arben stayed in cheap apartments and drove old sedans. He understood that attention was death. Every penny went back into the operation, buying contacts, bribing court officials, and securing safe houses. Yet, deep inside, Arben dreamed bigger. He saw New York not as a home, but as a gateway. Behind his quiet eyes was a vision to create a criminal network so disciplined, so untouchable, that no one could ever trace it back to him. The foundation had been laid, and the streets of America were about to witness the silent rise of a new kind of underworld, a network ruled not by legacy or tradition, but by fear, precision, and shadows. Arben's empire began to grow when fate introduced him to Leka, a man who would unknowingly open the door to the next phase of the Albanian rise. Mark was an aging nightclub owner from Queens, well connected to both the party scene and the criminal underground. Years of dealing with drug traffickers had left him desperate for protection and cleaner ways to move product. Arben offered him both. Their meeting was quiet, away from the noise of the city, sealed with a simple handshake that would soon change the balance of power in New York's underworld. Under the cover of flashing lights and loud music, Arben's men began running narcotics through Mark's nightclubs. They hid the shipments inside imported wine crates and food containers from Europe. The drugs arrived through the same docks Arben had once worked on, passing undetected thanks to a few well-placed bribes. It was clever, silent, and invisible. The money poured in faster than anyone expected, and for the first time, Arben saw the scale of what was possible. He wasn't just smuggling anymore, he was building an empire. But power always attracts attention. Within months, a Dominican crew tried to intercept one of Arben's deliveries. They were used to controlling parts of Queens and saw the Albanians as newcomers trespassing on their turf. Arben could have negotiated, but that wasn't his way. He believed in making examples. Within 48 hours, his men tracked down the Dominican gang's leader and 2 of his lieutenants. What happened next was never reported in detail, but when a warehouse fire in the Bronx revealed 3 burned bodies with their fingertips removed, everyone knew who had sent the message. It was Arben's silent declaration: "We are here, and we do not share." After that, no one dared interfere. Fear spread through the streets faster than any rumor. The Albanians weren't loud like the Italians, nor reckless like the Russians. They were disciplined, calculated, and ruthless. Arben's reputation grew, not through headlines or police reports, but through whispers. Even the city's toughest criminals began using his name carefully, aware that he was always watching and always 2 steps ahead. With the cash from narcotics, Arben expanded his network. He bought trucking companies, storage facilities, and shipping containers under fake identities. Every legitimate business masked something illegal. Mark Leka's nightclubs became fronts for laundering money, with accountants working day and night to balance fake books. The profits were moved through European shell companies and reappeared clean in U.S. banks. To authorities, it looked like success built on nightlife and entertainment. Behind the glamour, though, the operation was turning darker. Arben began recruiting men who were not afraid to die. He imported soldiers from Albania and Kosovo, men who had seen real war and didn't hesitate when ordered to kill. They formed his enforcement wing, protecting shipments, collecting debts, and silencing threats. As Mark enjoyed his new wealth, he didn't realize he had become a pawn. Arben had already planned to replace him once the network no longer needed his clubs. The Albanian Mafia was no longer hiding, it was evolving, turning into a machine built on loyalty, fear, and silence. And under Arben's watchful eyes, America's Underworld had just gained a new and dangerous power. By 2007, Arben's organization had transformed into something far beyond a street operation. What began as a small crew in the Bronx had become a national network that stretched from New York to Chicago, Detroit, and Miami. The FBI called them the Ghosts because no one ever saw them coming. They left no traces, no records, and no witnesses. Their crimes were perfectly executed and meticulously planned. It wasn't luck, it was the result of Arben's obsession with control. Every man in his circle had a role, every shipment had a code, and every move was designed to disappear into the chaos of the American underworld. Arben rarely appeared in public anymore. He communicated through layers of intermediaries, encrypted phones, and offshore accounts. The people who worked for him often didn't even know his real name. They referred to him only as the man from Tirana. What kept everyone loyal wasn't money, it was fear. Arben had a simple rule: once you joined, you never left. Those who tried were erased, their names removed from every file, their faces forgotten. One of the most vital figures in Arben's empire was Gentian Dervishi, a brilliant but ruthless operator who handled the financial side of the business. Gentian was unlike the muscle-bound enforcers Arben usually trusted. He wore tailored suits, spoke 4 languages, and had a degree in economics from a European university. His skill was not in violence, but in numbers. Gentian built a complex network of shell companies' construction firms. car dealerships, and import businesses that laundered millions of dollars each month. To law enforcement, these enterprises looked completely legitimate, but beneath the surface, they were washing dirty cash from drug deals, arms sales, and black market goods. The money trail was nearly impossible to follow. Funds moved from small American banks into European accounts, then into cryptocurrency wallets and offshore trusts. The FBI could see the movement, but could never connect it to anyone real. It was as if the organization itself was a living ghost. Arben rarely had to touch a dollar in person. He controlled everything remotely, issuing orders through secret codes and untraceable channels. While the FBI chased street-level dealers and mid-tier traffickers, the real power stayed hidden behind business suits and clean paperwork. Gentian used his influence to buy legitimate properties, warehouses, restaurants, apartment complexes, turning dirty money into respectable assets. Local politicians, unaware of who truly owned these businesses, welcomed the foreign investors, bringing jobs and cash into their districts. Every handshake, every ribbon-cutting ceremony made the network stronger. But the success brought new dangers. Rival groups began noticing how quickly the Albanians were expanding. The Russians tried to muscle in on Detroit, and remnants of the Italian mob tried to claim Chicago's South Side. Each time, the Albanians responded quietly but brutally. Cars exploded without warning, buildings mysteriously burned, and key figures disappeared overnight. No witnesses, no survivors, no proof. The streets learned one lesson: never cross the Balkan Shadow. By the end of the decade, Arben's network was earning tens of millions every month. Drugs, weapons, smuggling, and laundering, all controlled by men who never appeared in photographs. The organization had become invisible, its leader a myth, whispered in prisons and police stations alike. America's criminal underworld was being rewritten, and the author was a ghost from Albania. The first serious fracture in Arben's empire appeared when greed slipped in through family ties. Gentian Dervishi's cousin, Liridon Muca, had been working as a mid-level courier in Miami, trusted to oversee small shipments of heroin arriving from Europe. He was young, reckless, and desperate to prove himself. But unlike Arben and Gentian, he lacked discipline. Liridon started running extra shipments on the side, dealing with outsiders and pocketing the profits without permission. It was a fatal mistake. The Albanians had strict rules. Every deal flowed upward. Every profit was counted. No one took what belonged to the organization. The trouble began when a shipment Liridon arranged independently was intercepted by the D during a sting at the port of Miami. The seizure was small, but it contained packaging identical to Arben's official product lines. That raised questions inside the agency. When agents traced the operation, they found a money trail that led directly to a warehouse tied to one of Gentian's shell companies. The news spread fast through the network. Arben was furious, though no one saw his anger. He simply went silent, and everyone knew that silence meant danger. Liridon, panicked, tried to fix things by cooperating with law enforcement. The D saw an opportunity and offered him protection in exchange for inside information on the Albanian network. Liridon accepted. He gave them names, routes, and financial hints, most of which were fragments, but dangerous enough to attract federal attention. It was the first real threat to Arben's invisible empire. For the first time in years, someone inside his circle had broken the code of silence. When the FBI joined the investigation, they transferred Liridon to a high-security facility in Florida, preparing him to testify before a grand jury. They believed he was safe, guarded around the clock. But Arben's reach extended far beyond anyone's imagination. 2 days before his scheduled testimony, Liridon vanished. There was no sign of forced entry, no video footage, no witnesses. His guards were found unconscious, their drinks laced with a sedative. A week later, his car was discovered deep in the Florida Everglades. The doors were open, Blood stained the seats, but the body was gone. The DIs stunned. It was as if the earth itself had swallowed him. Theories swirled. Some claimed Arben had paid someone inside the agency. Others whispered that Liridon's body had been fed to the alligators to erase every trace. The message was unmistakable. Betrayal had a price, and even federal custody couldn't protect you from Arben's reach. The incident shook law enforcement. Agents began fearing for their safety. Informants refused to talk, and several local officers resigned from undercover operations connected to the case. Files disappeared mysteriously from storage, and evidence went missing from evidence rooms. Someone somewhere was helping the Albanians stay one step ahead. Gentian grew quieter after Liridon's death, realizing that Arben's control was not just through money or loyalty, it was through fear that ran bone deep. The organization continued to function as if nothing had happened, but the mood had changed. Inside the network, trust became fragile and whispers of paranoia spread. Liridon's disappearance was more than punishment. It was a warning carved into everyone's mind. No one betrayed the Balkan Shadow and lived to tell the story. The years that followed Liridon's disappearance marked the beginning of a silent but deadly war across America's underworld. Arben's empire had reached its peak, controlling everything from narcotics and human trafficking to construction scams and arms smuggling. But power on that scale could never go unnoticed. The Italian Mafia, long considered the dominant force on the East Coast, began to feel the Albanians cutting into their business. In the South, Mexican cartels were expanding their cocaine routes and saw the Albanians as a threat to their control. The streets were slowly turning into battlefields, though few ever saw the bodies. It started subtly. A truck belonging to a Mexican syndicate was found torched in New Jersey. A week later, one of Arben's distribution hubs in Chicago exploded overnight. The official report called it a gas leak, but everyone knew better. Both sides were sending messages, testing how far the other would go. But unlike the loud and public wars that had destroyed other criminal families, Arben's methods were quiet and surgical. His men didn't fight openly. They erased enemies one by one. In the middle of this chaos, a seasoned New York detective named Raymond began noticing patterns. He had spent years studying organized crime, and the numbers didn't add up. The Italian families were losing control, but their rivals weren't visible. The crimes were too clean, the disappearances too precise. It was as if a ghost organization was operating behind the scenes, eliminating competition and taking over their businesses without leaving fingerprints. Raymond became obsessed. He started connecting cases from different cities' arsons in Detroit, smuggling busts in Miami, and assassinations in Chicago. Every trail led back to one name, whispered in coded phone calls: the Balkan Shadow. Raymond worked day and night, building a secret file that mapped out dozens of shell companies, nightclubs, and import businesses. He believed they all tied to one man, though he didn't know who. The problem was that every time he got close, something went wrong. Witnesses disappeared before they could testify. Surveillance footage vanished from evidence rooms. Informants either turned up dead or simply stopped showing up. Even within law enforcement, there were rumors that the Albanians had insiders feeding them information. Raymond didn't trust anyone anymore. Meanwhile, Arben kept expanding. He built alliances with small Eastern European gangs, offering them protection in exchange for loyalty. His network became a multinational machine, moving money and drugs across borders with precision. Violence remained controlled, almost businesslike. Each killing served a purpose. Each disappearance sent a message. His philosophy was simple: fear lasts longer than bullets. The silent war reached its peak when an Italian capo's body was found hanging from a bridge in Staten Island, wrapped in a tarp, a single euro coin placed in his mouth. It was symbolic, a mark of who ruled now. The old families were collapsing. The cartels were retreating. and the Albanians were filling every gap left behind. Detective Cross tried to sound the alarm, but few believed him. To the public, crime rates were dropping. To the FBI, the mafia problem seemed under control. But Raymond knew better. The violence had simply gone underground, invisible to cameras and headlines. The Albanian Mafia had achieved what no other syndicate had done before. They ruled through shadows, hidden behind legitimate businesses and fear so deep that no one dared even speak their leader's name aloud. America's underworld had changed forever, and no one even saw it happen. In 2018, after nearly 2 decades of dominance, the walls finally began to close in around Arben's empire. Years of silent operations and clean crimes had made the Albanian Mafia nearly untouchable, but the FBI had grown smarter. A new joint task force combining the Homeland Security, and financial crime units began piecing together fragments of information collected over the years. A name kept resurfacing in coded transactions, offshore records, and encrypted messages: Arben Krasniqi, the man who didn't officially exist. His birth records in Albania had been erased, his passport was fake, and his fingerprints were never found in any U.S. database. Still, the pattern of money and violence pointed to him. Detective Raymond Cross, now working with the task force, pushed harder than anyone else. He had lost colleagues, informants, and years of his life chasing ghosts, but he was determined to end it. Through months of surveillance and digital tracing, they uncovered a lead: a warehouse in New Jersey that was being used as a central hub for laundering millions through fake import contracts. With that discovery, the authorities launched a massive operation spanning 3 states: New York, Florida, and Illinois. The raids were sudden and violent. Federal agents stormed properties, seizing luxury cars, cash, weapons, and drugs. Over 50 arrests were made in one night, many of them low and mid-level operatives. News outlets exploded with headlines about the fall of the Albanian Mafia, calling it one of the largest organized crime takedowns in U.S. history. But amid the chaos, there was one crucial absence: Arben himself. When agents reached his rumored penthouse in Manhattan, they found nothing but an empty apartment. The bed was made, the lights were off, and a single glass sat on the kitchen counter. It was as if he had vanished hours before the raid began. No signs of struggle, no fingerprints, no documents, just silence. Someone inside must have warned him, but no one in custody would speak. Every person questioned either claimed ignorance or refused to talk. It became clear that even behind bars, Arben's power still reached them. Rumors began circulating that he had escaped to Albania weeks before the raid, traveling under a new identity through Canada. Others whispered that he was hiding somewhere in Florida, living quietly under another name, running smaller operations through proxies. The truth was uncertain, and despite all the evidence, no one could definitively prove that Arben Krasniqi had ever been in the United States. Without his arrest, the government's case began to crumble. Files disappeared from digital archives, bank trails went cold, and key witnesses recanted their statements. The empire seemed to dissolve into thin air, leaving investigators with nothing but questions. Years later, retired agents still speak about the case with frustration and awe. Some believe Arben is alive, living freely, his empire rebuilt under different faces. Others think he died long ago, leaving behind a system so perfectly designed that it continues to operate without him. What everyone agrees on is that his influence changed organized crime forever. The Albanian Mafia didn't just conquer America's underworld. They became part of its unseen structure, woven into the businesses, banks, and streets that make the country run. Detective Cross never found peace. Even in retirement, he kept a file marked "The Balkan Shadow" on his desk, convinced that one day Arben's name would surface again. But it never did. No sightings, no arrests, no closure. Just a legend of a man who came from nothing, built an invisible empire, and vanished before anyone could touch him. In the end, the greatest power Arben ever achieved was not ruling the underworld. It was disappearing from it, leaving behind nothing but silence and fear that still lingers in America's darkest corners.